What does warmth mean when the world itself has turned to ice? When every breath clouds the air before you, when dawn brings no relief from the cold, and when sleep itself becomes an act of courage. Tonight, we drift back 25,000 years to a time when humanity clung to existence in caves carved by ancient waters, beneath skies that glittered with stars our ancestors knew by different names. A time when winter was not a season, but a way of life, stretching across months of darkness, testing every fragile thread that held communities together. Imagine yourself there, in that impossible cold. Imagine the weight of animal hides against your skin, the sting of smoke in your eyes, the distant howl of wind through stone corridors. Imagine what it meant to close your eyes at night, not knowing if morning would come with warmth or simply more of the same bone-deep chill. This is not a story of heroes or grand battles. There are no kings here, no empires, only small bands of people clinging to fire, to each other, to the stubborn insistence that survival is possible, even when every night feels like surrendering to the cold. Before we drift together into the frozen winters of the Upper Paleolithic, I'd like to ask a little kindness. Press the like button if you're ready to wander softly back through time tonight. And if these quiet stories bring you peace, consider subscribing so you'll always have a place here among history's gentlest echoes. I'd love to know where you are listening from and what hour it is for you. Some of you may be wrapping yourself in the hush of midnight, others greeting the first stirrings of morning, and perhaps a few caught somewhere in between. So, lower the lights, let a steady fan or soft hum fill the room, and allow yourself to settle in. Our journey through history is about to begin. Let the world outside fade away. Let the glow of your screen become a sort of firelight, flickering against the walls of your own modern cave. And let us drift together into the long, cold nights of the Ice Age, where sleep was not rest, but survival, and warmth was the rarest, most precious gift of all. The first thing you notice always is the cold. It lives in your bones now, a constant companion, familiar as your own breath. You've forgotten what true warmth feels like, the kind that reaches all the way through your body, that makes your muscles soften and your mind grow quiet. That warmth is a memory from summer, and summer feels like something you dreamed once, long ago. You wake slowly, reluctantly, your body stiff against the packed earth beneath you. The fire has died sometime in the night. It always does. No matter how carefully you tend it before sleep, no matter how much wood you pile near the flames, the cold eventually wins. The darkness of the cave presses close around you, thick and heavy, broken only by the faintest grey light seeping in from the entrance many paces away. Your breath makes small clouds in the air. You can hear others breathing nearby, your sister, your mother, the children huddled together like a litter of newborn animals. Someone coughs, a wet, rattling sound that echoes softly against the stone walls. That cough has been with your band for weeks now, passing from person to person, never quite leaving, never quite killing, just wearing everyone down, breath by labored breath. The furs covering you are damp. They're always damp in winter. Your body heat melts the frost that forms on them during the night, and that moisture seeps through, cold and clammy against your skin. The hide of a reindeer, killed 2 moons ago, still carries the faint smell of the animal it once protected. Beneath that, the sharper scent of smoke, of human sweat, of the cave itself, mineral and ancient and somehow alive. You don't want to move. Moving means leaving the small pocket of warmth your body has created beneath these hides. Moving means facing the cold air, means beginning another day of the same endless tasks that filled yesterday, and the day before, and all the days, stretching back through this winter that seems to have no end. But you must move. You must always move. Stillness is death in winter. You push the hides aside slowly, feeling the shock of cold air against your chest, your arms, your legs wrapped in poorly tanned leather that's gone stiff and rough. Your fingers are already aching, the joints swollen and tender. You've had this pain since you were young, since the first winter you can remember, and it never truly leaves any more. In summer, it retreats to a dull throb, but in winter, it blossoms into something sharp and insistent, making every small movement a conscious act of will. The floor of the cave is a patchwork of stone and hard-packed earth, littered with the debris of living. Animal bones gnawed and split for their marrow, scraps of hide stiff and curled, the scattered remnants of last night's fire, ash and half-burnt wood, still faintly warm if you crouch close enough. You move carefully in the darkness, your feet knowing the path by memory, avoiding the sharper stones, the places where water seeps up through cracks and freezes into slick patches. Others are stirring now. You hear the soft sounds of people waking, groans, whispers, the rustle of hides being pushed aside. Someone strikes stones together near the hearth, trying to coax a spark into the nest of dried grass and moss prepared last night. Once, twice, 3 times, a small orange glow appears, fragile as hope itself. Gentle breath, carefully controlled. Too much air and the spark dies. Too little and it never catches. This is a skill learned over years, over generations, passed from mother to daughter, father to son, a knowledge as vital as hunting, as essential as knowing which plants will kill you and which will ease the pain in your belly. The fire begins to grow, tentative at first, then stronger. Yellow flames lick upward, and the cave fills with flickering light and the immediate acrid smell of burning wood. Not the clean, dry wood of summer campfires, but the damp, half-frozen branches gathered yesterday from the forest, each one requiring hours of work to break free from ice, to carry back through snow that reached your thighs, that made every step an exhausting battle. You move toward the fire, as does everyone else. The warmth draws you like something alive, like a creature you could worship. And perhaps in a way you do. The fire is the center of everything. Without it, your band would last perhaps 3 nights, maybe 4, if you had warning enough to prepare. With it, you can endure. Not comfortably, not happily, but you can endure. The smoke rises and spreads across the cave ceiling, forming a grey cloud that hangs perpetually above your heads. Some of it finds its way out through cracks in the rock, through the cave entrance where the cold wind howls in, but most of it stays trapped, filling your lungs, making your eyes water, settling into your clothing, your hair, your skin. You've lived with this smoke for so long that you barely notice it anymore. Sometimes, when the wind shifts and blows it all outside for a moment, the sudden clarity makes you dizzy. Your first task, always, is fuel. The fire cannot be allowed to die. Not during the day when the work of living must continue. Not during the night when the temperature drops so low that water left in a hide container turns solid, when frost forms on the cave walls themselves, glittering like the stars outside. You wrap a piece of mammoth hide around your shoulders, the thick winter cloak that took your mother 3 full moons to prepare, scraping and softening the leather, sewing it with sinew thread and bone needles worn smooth by years of use. It's heavy, this cloak, and it smells strongly of the animal fat rubbed into it for waterproofing, but it's the difference between survival and freezing when you step outside. The entrance to the cave is a passage between one world and another. Inside there is smoke and fire and the press of human bodies. Outside there is something vast and merciless, a whiteness that stretches to the horizon and beyond, broken only by the dark shapes of trees heavy with snow, by the distant mountains that seem to touch the clouds themselves. You step out and the wind hits you immediately. It's not the howling gale of a storm, not today, but a steady, relentless wind that seems to find every gap in your clothing, every place where skin is exposed. Your face goes numb within moments. Your eyes water, and the tears freeze on your cheeks. You squint against the brightness of snow, reflecting the weak winter sun, so different from the dimness of the cave. The landscape is beautiful and terrible. Snow covers everything, deep and soft in some places, crusted and hard in others, where the wind has packed it down. Here and there, rocks jut through the white blanket, dark and ancient, offering no shelter, no warmth, no kindness. The trees are skeletal, their branches bare except for ice that coats them like glass. Sometimes the ice catches the sunlight and throws it back in rainbow colors, beautiful and utterly indifferent to your struggle. You're not alone in this work. Others from your band are already out, moving slowly through the snow, searching for anything that will burn. Dead branches from trees, always difficult to break free when they're frozen solid. Dried grasses, if you can find them under the snow, if the moisture hasn't rotted them entirely. Animal dung, when you're fortunate enough to find it. The droppings of mammoth or bison or horse, dried and frozen, burning slowly with a smell you've grown accustomed to. Everything is a calculation. How much energy will you spend to gather this fuel? How much warmth will it provide? Is it worth the risk of wandering too far from the cave, of being caught in the open if the weather turns? You've lost people this way. 2 winters ago, a young man from your band went out to check snares and never returned. They found him 3 days later, frozen in a crouch beneath a fallen log, still clutching the rabbit he'd freed from the trap. The rabbit was frozen too. Neither of them could be saved. You gather wood slowly, methodically, breaking branches with your hands when you can, using a stone axe when you must. Each piece of wood is examined, tested. Is it too wet? Will it only smoke and refuse to catch? Is it dry enough to burn clean? You're building a pile in your arms, feeling the weight grow, feeling your fingers going more and more numb despite the work. The sun moves across the sky, though you can't see it clearly through the clouds. Time passes differently in winter. Days blur together into one long twilight, punctuated by the deeper darkness of night. Sometimes you wake and don't know if you've slept for hours or for moments. Sometimes the night seems to last forever, and you wonder if the sun will ever return, or if this is how the world ends, in cold and darkness, in the slow extinction of light. When your arms can hold no more wood, you turn back toward the cave. The journey back is harder than the journey out. Your muscles are tired, your hands are past feeling, and the weight of the wood makes you clumsy. You stumble, catch yourself, keep moving. Behind you, your footprints in the snow are already filling with fresh powder, blown by the wind, erasing the evidence of your passage. Inside again, the smoke stings your eyes, but the warmth is a relief so profound you could weep. You add your wood to the pile near the fire, stack it carefully so it will dry a little before burning. Others are doing the same, moving like shadows in the smoke-filled air, each person performing their part in the endless rhythm of survival. Now the other tasks begin. Your sister is scraping a hide, working the skin of a reindeer killed 4 days ago before the last storm. The hide must be scraped clean of any remaining fat and tissue, or it will rot, will become useless. She works with a sharp flint scraper, worn smooth in the middle where generations of hands have gripped it. The motion is repetitive, rhythmic. Scrape, examine, scrape again. Her hands are red and raw from the work, cracked and bleeding in places, but she doesn't stop. She can't stop. The hide represents warmth, represents clothing or bedding or a container for carrying water. The hide represents survival. You join others who are working on smaller tasks, sharpening stone tools, a delicate process of striking flakes away from a core, creating edges sharp enough to cut through hide and meat, weaving grass into loose mats that will go beneath the sleeping furs, providing a small barrier between bodies and the cold stone floor, grinding dried meat and fat together to make pemmican, food that will last, that will keep you alive when hunting is impossible. A child cries somewhere in the deeper shadows of the cave. She's hungry. Everyone is hungry. In summer, hunger is an annoyance, easily solved with a few hours of foraging, of fishing in the streams that run clear and cold. In winter, hunger is a presence, a guest who never leaves, who makes your belly cramp and your thoughts turn slow and foggy. The last successful hunt was 8 days ago, a reindeer, thin from winter but still offering meat and hide and bone. The hunters came back exhausted, covered in snow, but triumphant. You'd eaten well that night, had felt the warmth of cooked meat filling your belly, had slept deeply for the first time in weeks, but that meat is nearly gone now. What remains has been dried, smoked, carefully rationed. Each person gets a small piece twice a day. It's never enough. Between meals, you chew on scraps. Sinew, tough and flavorless, but requiring long minutes of chewing, giving your jaw something to do, tricking your stomach into thinking it's been fed. Bone marrow, scraped from the hollow centers of leg bones, fatty and rich, but gone in moments. Bits of dried fish from autumn stores, each piece precious, each piece measured out with careful consideration. There are plants, even in winter, if you know where to look. Beneath the snow, some roots survive, though they require hours of digging through frozen earth to reach them. Bark from certain trees can be scraped and boiled into something resembling food, bitter and difficult to swallow, but providing substance, providing something to fill the emptiness. You think about hunger the way you never thought about it in summer. In summer, hunger was a signal, easily answered. In winter, hunger is a philosophy, a state of being, a companion who whispers constantly in your ear, never silent, never satisfied. The day passes in this way, task after task, each one necessary, each one requiring effort that you barely have to give. You stop only to eat your ration. Today, it's a piece of dried reindeer meat the size of your thumb, and a handful of roasted pine nuts collected last autumn. You chew, slowly, trying to make it last, trying to extract every bit of nutrition, every moment of flavor. It's gone too quickly. It's always gone too quickly. As the weak winter light begins to fail, as the grey day turns toward the deeper grey of evening, the band gathers near the fire. This is the best time, perhaps the only good time in winter. The work is done, or at least suspended until morning. The fire is fed and burning well, pushing back the cold and the darkness. People settle onto their sleeping places, onto the piles of furs and the grass mats, leaning against the cave walls or against each other. Someone begins a story. You've heard it before many times, but that doesn't matter. The stories are not really about novelty. They're about connection, about the sound of a human voice filling the space, about remembering that you are not alone, that your band has existed before you and will exist after you, that you are part of something larger than your own cold, tired body. The story tonight is about the great hunt, about the mammoth that came to the valley 3 generations ago, about how your people tracked it for 5 days through snow and wind, about how they finally brought it down and feasted for a moon, about how the ivory from its tusks still exists, carved into tools and ornaments that your band treasures. You listen, letting the words wash over you, letting the rhythm of the storyteller's voice soothe the ache in your muscles, the gnaw of hunger in your belly. You watch the fire, watch the way the flames dance and shift, casting shadows that seem to move with a life of their own. Sometimes, in these shadows, you think you see shapes, animals, spirits, ancestors. You're never quite sure if you're imagining them or if they're really there, watching from some place beyond the fire's light. The children fall asleep first, curled together like puppies, their breathing evening out into the soft rhythm of dreams. Then the elders, exhausted by the simple effort of living another day. Then, one by one, the others drift off, until only a few remain awake, tending the fire, keeping watch, ensuring that the flames don't die, that the cold doesn't creep in and steal what warmth you've managed to create. You move to your sleeping place, to the patch of ground you've claimed as your own, though nothing here is truly owned. You arrange the furs over yourself, pull them tight, try to seal every gap where cold air might enter. Others press close, your sister on one side, a young cousin on the other. This is how you sleep in winter, bodies sharing warmth, breath mingling in the cold air, hearts beating in a collective rhythm of survival. The furs are heavy against your chest, making it slightly difficult to breathe, but you don't push them away. The weight is comforting, a pressure that makes you feel held, protected, even though you know how fragile that protection really is. The fire crackles and pops, someone feeds it another log, and sparks rise up, floating toward the smoke-stained ceiling like tiny orange stars. You watch them drift and fade, watch them disappear into the darkness above. Your body begins to relax, slowly, reluctantly. The ache in your joints settles into a dull throb. The hunger in your belly becomes something you can ignore, at least for a while. The cold is still there, it's always there, but wrapped in furs, pressed between warm bodies, you can almost forget it. Sleep comes gradually, not all at once, but in waves. You drift in and out, aware of the fire's light even through closed eyelids, aware of the sounds of the cave, breathing, the occasional cough, the crackle of burning wood, the wind outside singing its endless song through stone corridors. And in those moments before true sleep takes you, you think about warmth. Real warmth. The warmth of summer sun on your skin. The warmth of a full belly. The warmth of safety, of certainty, of days that don't require every ounce of strength just to survive. But those are dreams, and dreams are luxuries. Right now, in this moment, warmth is the heat of the fire a few paces away. Warmth is the body pressed against yours, sharing what little heat they have. Warmth is the knowledge that you survived another day, that you'll wake again tomorrow, that you'll continue this endless dance with the cold for one more day, and then another, until finally, eventually, the ice begins to retreat, and the world remembers what it means to be soft and green and alive. You close your eyes fully now. Let the smoke and the darkness and the exhaustion pull you down into sleep. Tomorrow will bring the same struggles, the same cold, the same hunger. But tomorrow is not yet here. Right now there is only this. The weight of furs, the warmth of bodies, the distant crackle of fire, and the slow, steady rhythm of your own breath, becoming quieter, becoming calmer, becoming the breath of sleep. The rhythm of your days is endless. Wake, gather, prepare, survive, sleep. Wake, gather, prepare, survive, sleep. A cycle that wears grooves into your mind like water, wearing grooves into stone, deep and permanent and inescapable. But you endure. Your people have always endured. Through winters longer than this one, through storms more fierce, through hunger more desperate. You carry that endurance in your bones, in your blood, in the stories told around the fire. You are not the first to sleep cold, and you will not be the last. And perhaps that's enough. Perhaps simply lasting until morning, until spring, until the next story, the next fire, the next moment of warmth. Perhaps that's all survival really is. Not triumph, not comfort, but the stubborn refusal to let the cold win completely, the determination to open your eyes one more time, to draw one more breath, to press together in the darkness and declare, silently but firmly, that you are still here. Still here, still breathing, still warm enough to dream, still warm. As the fire settles into glowing coals, as the smoke thins and rises, let us drift now from the collective struggle to a single life. One person among many. One winter among countless winters. One story that archaeology has preserved, frozen in time like the frost that once covered her sleeping place. Her name is lost to us. It vanished with the last person who spoke it, thousands of years before writing existed, before names could be captured and held against the erosion of time. But we can call her by the place where she was found, where her bones lay undisturbed for 34,000 years, waiting in the permafrost of what is now Russia, near the Vladimir region, at a site called Sunghir. She was buried with care, with intention, with something that looks across the vast distance of millennia remarkably like love. Let us imagine her life not as invention, but as careful reconstruction. The bones tell us some things, the artifacts buried with her tell us others. The landscape itself, frozen and preserved, offers clues, and from these fragments we can build a picture, soft-edged and incomplete, but human, always human. She was born in late summer, we might imagine, when the band had moved to higher ground to follow the reindeer herds, when the air was still warm enough that babies could survive without the constant press of bodies, without the desperate need for fire every moment of every day. Her mother labored in a shelter made of mammoth bones and hide, surrounded by the women of the band who sang and whispered encouragement, who had brought all the children of the group into the world, who knew the rhythms of birth the way they knew the rhythms of seasons, of migrations, of the turning stars. She was small when she arrived, as all babies are small, but she cried with a strength that pleased her mother, that made the midwives nod and smile. A strong cry meant strong lungs. Strong lungs meant survival. So many babies were born silent or crying too weakly, and those babies rarely saw their first winter. But she did. She survived that first winter, pressed against her mother's chest, nursing constantly, kept warm by her mother's body heat and by the furs wrapped around them both. She slept the way newborns sleep, in fits and starts, waking to nurse, to cry, to feel the comfort of her mother's heartbeat, then drifting back into the deep, dreamless sleep of infancy. By her second winter, she was walking, stumbling through the snow on unsteady legs, learning to keep her balance, learning that falling in snow was soft, but falling on ice was hard and unforgiving. She learned to stay close to the fire, learned which adults would pick her up when she cried, and which would simply step over her, busy with their own survival. She learned the taste of mammoth fat, rich and greasy, smeared on her tongue when meat was scarce, and the adults needed her to have calories, needed her to stay warm, stay alive. She learned the texture of hide clothing, the way it chafed against her neck, the way it grew stiff when wet and stayed wet for days. Her childhood was not filled with play, not in the way we imagine childhood. There were moments of play, certainly, chasing other children around the cave, splashing in the stream during brief summer months, examining interesting rocks and bones and beetles. But most of her days were filled with watching, with learning, with the slow acquisition of the 1,000 skills necessary to survive. She watched her mother scrape hides, and then she tried it herself, with a small scraper made for her small hands. The first hide she ruined, scraping too hard, tearing through the skin, creating holes that made it useless for clothing. Her mother did not scold her, There was no anger, only patience, and the quiet demonstration of how to adjust the angle, how to feel when the scraper was biting too deep. She watched her grandmother gather plants, and then she walked beside her, learning to recognize the shapes of edible roots, even when they were barely visible beneath snow, learning which bark could be eaten and which would make her sick, learning the locations of berry bushes that would fruit in summer, learning to remember these places so she could return to them year after year. By her 10th winter, she was contributing to the band's survival in small but meaningful ways. She could gather wood efficiently, could find fuel even when snow was deep, could identify the animal tracks that meant food nearby. She could stitch simple repairs in clothing using bone needles and sinew thread. She could tend the fire through the night, waking periodically to add fuel to ensure the flames never died completely. She was also learning the skills that would define her life, that would make her valuable to the band in ways that went beyond simple survival. She had nimble fingers and patient focus, qualities that suited her to detailed work. The elders noticed this. They began teaching her to make beads. The beads were carved from mammoth ivory, painstakingly shaped with stone tools, each one requiring hours of careful work. The ivory had to be cut into small sections, then hollowed out to create a hole for threading, then smoothed and polished until it gleamed like moonlight. A single bead might take a full day to complete. A necklace might require dozens of beads. Why make beads in a world where survival was uncertain, where hunger was constant, where every moment of effort seemed better spent on gathering food or preparing shelter? This is a question that archaeologists still ask. But the beads were made century after century, culture after culture, suggesting that they served a purpose beyond mere decoration. Perhaps they marked status, identifying skilled craftspeople or successful hunters. Perhaps they had spiritual significance, offering protection or connection to the ancestors. Perhaps they were simply beautiful, and beauty itself was a form of survival, a reminder that life contained more than cold and hunger, that humans could create something precious even in the harshest conditions. She made beads through countless winters, sitting by the fire, her fingers moving with practiced precision, creating small marvels of symmetry and patience. The work required such focus that it pushed away other thoughts: hunger, cold, worry about the future. In this way, making beads became a kind of meditation, a way of surviving not just physically but mentally, emotionally. As she moved into her adult years, she took a partner. Not through any formal ceremony that we would recognize, but through a gradual drawing together, a choice made and accepted by the band. He was a skilled hunter, strong and careful, someone who came back from expeditions more often than not, who understood how to read the weather, the animals, the subtle signs that meant danger or opportunity. Together they shared sleeping furs, shared food, shared the endless work of living. Together they pressed close on the coldest nights, their breath mingling in the frozen air, their bodies creating a small pocket of warmth in the vast coldness of the world. She bore children, 3 that survived past infancy, 2 that did not. The losses were hard, but not unexpected. Every woman in the band had lost children. Every mother understood that bringing a life into this world meant accepting the possibility, the likelihood, that it might not last. When her babies died, the band mourned with her in their quiet way. They did not speak of it constantly, did not dwell on loss, but they sat close to her at night. They offered her extra portions when food allowed. They let her hold their surviving children, letting her feel the weight and warmth of life continuing despite everything. Her surviving children grew strong. She taught them what she knew: how to stay warm, how to find food, how to make beads from ivory. She watched them learn to walk, to talk, to become small people with their own ideas and stubbornness and laughter. She pressed them close on winter nights, counting their breaths in the darkness, grateful for each one. The winters accumulated. She was no longer young, though in Ice Age terms she was not particularly old either. Perhaps 40 years, perhaps less. Her body carried the marks of her life, scars from cuts and burns, teeth worn down from chewing hide to soften it, joints that ached in the cold, a persistent cough that came every winter and never quite left. But she was still valuable to the band, still skilled. Her fingers could still create beads of extraordinary delicacy, could still stitch repairs in clothing that would last through the harshest weather. Her knowledge of plants, of seasons, of the patterns of animal migration, this knowledge was irreplaceable, earned through decades of observation, impossible to learn from anything but lived experience. She was teaching the younger women now, passing on what she knew, ensuring that her skills would not die with her. This is how knowledge survived in a world without writing, through demonstration, through practice, through the patient transmission from one generation to the next. One winter, the cough that always came grew worse instead of better. It settled deep in her chest, rattling and wet, making it difficult to breathe, making every inhalation a conscious effort. She grew weak, tired in a way that sleep could not fix. The band knew what this meant. They had seen it before. They cared for her as her strength faded. They gave her the best portions of meat, the warmest place by the fire, the softest furs for sleeping. They sat with her through the long nights, telling stories, singing the songs she had taught them, letting her know through presence and touch that she was not alone, that she mattered, that her life had meaning. When she died, they prepared her body with the same care she had shown in life. They dressed her in fine clothing, adorned with the beads she had spent so many winters creating. They painted her body with red ochre, a precious pigment that required long journeys to obtain, that was reserved for the most important rituals. They buried her in the frozen earth, no small feat in winter, requiring days of work to break through the permafrost. They arranged her body carefully, placed her favorite tools nearby, surrounded her with ivory carvings and thousands of beads, far more beads than any single person could wear in life, suggesting that the entire band had contributed, that everyone had offered something precious to honor her passing. Why did they do this? We cannot know for certain, but the evidence suggests something profound, that even in a world of scarcity, even when every resource was precious and survival was uncertain, these people chose to spend their time and effort on ritual, on ceremony, on the acknowledgement that a life had mattered, that a person had been loved. The burial at Sunghir is remarkable not because it's unique, but because it's preserved so well, because the permafrost held it intact for 34,000 years, protecting it from decay, keeping it frozen like a moment captured in time. But similar burials exist across the upper Paleolithic world, suggesting that this wasn't unusual, that caring for the dead was a fundamental part of what made these people human. She lies there still, in the Vladimir Regional Museum of History, her bones carefully preserved, her beads catalogued and studied. Scientists have examined her remains, have learned about her diet, her health, the diseases she endured. They've reconstructed her face using forensic techniques, giving her features once more, a broad nose, strong cheekbones, eyes that might have been brown or grey or green. But they cannot know what she thought about as she lay down to sleep each night. They cannot know what she dreamed, what she hoped for, what she feared. They cannot know if she was happy, if she felt her life was meaningful, if she looked at the stars on clear winter nights and wondered what they were, or if she was too tired, too cold, too focused on surviving to think about such thing. What we can know, what the burial itself tells us, is that she was valued, that her band invested time and resources and emotion into honoring her memory. That even in the depths of the Ice Age, even in the hardest winter, humans found ways to express love, to mark the passage of a life, to say that someone mattered, and in that sense, she is not so different from us. Separated by 34,000 years by vast changes in technology and culture and language, but connected by the same fundamental needs: warmth, food, safety, connection. The same capacity for care, for grief, for the creation of beauty in difficult circumstances. As we imagine her life, as we picture her sitting by the fire on winter nights, beads in hand, children nearby, smoke rising into the darkness, we are not looking at something alien or incomprehensible. We are looking at ourselves, stripped of modern comfort, facing the raw elements with nothing but ingenuity and determination and the quiet, stubborn insistence that life is worth living, that warmth is worth seeking, that sleep, when it finally comes, is precious beyond measure. She dreamed, perhaps, of spring, of the ice breaking, of water flowing again, of green things pushing up through thawed earth, of warmth that reached all the way through her body, that made her muscles relax, that let her breathe easily without the rattle in her chest. She dreamed perhaps of her children growing old, having children of their own, passing on the skills she had taught them, of the band surviving, continuing, moving through the seasons, telling stories around fires not yet kindled. She dreamed perhaps of nothing at all. Simply rested in the warmth of the fire, in the press of bodies around her, in the knowledge that she had survived another day, another winter, another moment in the long, cold struggle of being human in an inhuman world. And when she closed her eyes for the last time, surrounded by her people, wrapped in furs and affection, perhaps that was enough. Perhaps the warmth she felt in those final moments, the warmth of being known, being valued, being remembered, was all the comfort anyone could ask for. The beads they buried with her still gleam in museum light, 34,000 years later. Small, perfect circles of ivory, each one a tiny monument to patience, to skill, to the human capacity for creating beauty. Each one representing hours of work, hours of focus, hours of sitting by a fire while winter raged outside. Each one a way of saying, I was here, I lived, I mattered, and she did matter. She matters still. Her life, so distant from ours, so different in its daily struggles, speaks across the millennia with a voice that is somehow familiar. She reminds us that survival has always required more than just food and shelter. It has always required meaning, connection, the small comforts that make endurance possible. She reminds us that warmth is not just physical. It's the warmth of being seen, being valued, being part of something larger than yourself. It's the warmth of hands working together, of knowledge passed down, of care extended even when resources are scarce. It's the warmth of being buried with honor when you die, of being remembered, of having your life marked as significant in a world where significance is hard-won and precious. She sleeps now in a way she never could in life, perfectly still, perfectly preserved, perfectly protected from the cold. No hunger disturbs her rest, no need to wake and tend the fire, no children requiring care, no hides needing preparation, no endless cycle of survival demanding her attention. She has earned, at last, the warmth and peace that eluded her in life. And perhaps, in some way we cannot quite articulate, she has earned ours too. Our attention, our curiosity, our quiet acknowledgement that her struggle and ours are not so different, that the cold she faced and the cold we avoid are part of the same story. The long human story of seeking warmth, seeking shelter, seeking a good night's sleep in a world that does not always grant such things easily. Let us leave her there, in the museum, in the earth, in whatever place the dead go when the living stop telling their stories. Let us carry forward only the warmth of her memory, the lesson of her persistence, the strange comfort of knowing that we are not the first to struggle, not the first to sleep cold, not the first to wake uncertain if we can face another day. We are part of a chain that stretches back through time, through ice and fire, through countless winters and the springs that followed. And if she could endure with so little, then perhaps we can endure too with so much more. The fire burns low. The story quiets. And somewhere, in the darkness beyond the flames, her life continues in the only way that matters now. In the telling, in the remembering, in the small acknowledgement that she lived, she loved, she created beauty, and she slept at last, wrapped in warmth both physical and profound. Let us drift now into the spaces between certainty and speculation, into the quiet mysteries that archaeology presents but cannot fully answer. Let us wander through the questions that linger in the smoke-stained caves, that hide in the layers of ash and bone, that whisper from the darkness where ancient people once slept. How did they truly stay warm? How did they manage fire through endless winter nights? What did their beds feel like beneath bodies exhausted from survival? And what did they dream about, pressed together in the dark, with only firelight between them and the infinite cold? These are questions without complete answers. We have evidence, yes, fragments and traces, the physical remains of how people lived, but evidence can only tell us so much. It cannot capture the feeling of things, the small adjustments, and innovations that left no trace. The knowledge passed mouth to ear that vanished when the last speaker died. Still we can look. We can examine what remains. And in the looking, in the careful consideration of ash and earth and bone, we can begin to sense the edges of something true. Let us begin with fire, the most essential mystery of all. Fire was everything. This is not metaphor or exaggeration. Fire was the difference between life and death, between a cave that could shelter humans and a cave that was simply a hole in the rock. Without fire, the Ice Age would have remained impenetrable to our species, a frozen barrier we could not cross. But fire is difficult. It requires fuel, which must be gathered constantly. It requires oxygen, which must be balanced. Too little, and the fire dies. Too much, and it burns through fuel wastefully. It requires attention, vigilance, the kind of constant care that becomes exhausting over days and weeks and months. The psychological weight of fire maintenance cannot be overstated. Modern humans flip switches and adjust thermostats, barely thinking about the warmth that surrounds us. But for Ice Age people, warmth was never guaranteed. It was always conditional, always dependent on human effort and attention. The anxiety of this responsibility must have been profound, knowing that a moment's carelessness, a failure of attention, could mean death for everyone sheltering in the cave. So how did they manage it? How did people keep fires burning through winter nights that stretched 12, 14, 16 hours of darkness? Archaeological excavations of Ice Age caves reveal hearths, fire pits dug into the cave floor, often ringed with stones, their earth blackened by centuries of use. Some of these hearths are remarkably sophisticated, showing evidence of careful design. The stones around them are arranged to reflect heat back into the cave, to protect the flames from drafts, to create a kind of primitive furnace that could burn more efficiently than an open fire. The placement of these hearths reveals detailed environmental knowledge. They're positioned to take advantage of natural air currents, allowing smoke to drift toward cave openings rather than accumulating in living spaces. They're set at distances from walls that maximize reflected heat, while minimizing the risk of stones cracking from thermal stress. They're sized appropriately for the cave's volume, large enough to provide meaningful warmth, small enough not to consume oxygen too rapidly in enclosed spaces. In some caves, multiple hearths exist, suggesting that fires were kept in different locations, perhaps tended by different families, perhaps serving different purposes. One for cooking, one for warmth, one for working materials that required heat. The spatial organization of these hearths tells us about social structure, about how groups divided labor and space, about hierarchy and cooperation. But even the best-designed hearth cannot burn without fuel, and fuel in Ice Age winter was precious. Wood was available but often frozen, requiring enormous effort to break free and carry back to shelter. It burned quickly, especially if wet, producing more smoke than heat in the early stages of burning. The moisture in frozen wood hisses and spits as it heats, wasting energy, creating acrid smoke that stings eyes and throats, making the cave environment nearly unbearable until the wood dries enough to burn cleanly. So they supplemented. Archaeological evidence shows the use of animal dung, mammoth, bison, horse, dried and burned as fuel. Dung burns slowly, producing steady heat, though the smell is distinct and the smoke thick. The process of collecting, drying and storing dung would have been constant work, particularly in wet conditions where drying required sheltered space and time. They used bone as well, the large leg bones of mammoths and other megafauna, which could burn for hours once the fire was hot enough to ignite them. Bone fuel represented a remarkable innovation, a way of extracting every possible resource from hunted or scavenged animals. Even the marrow-stripped bones that seemed to have given all they could still contained energy that could be released through burning. They may have used fat as fuel too, rendered animal fat that could be burned in shallow stone lamps, providing light and a small amount of heat. These lamps appear in the archaeological record, simple bowls carved from stone with traces of burned fat still visible after thousands of years. The soft, warm light they provided would have been gentler than firelight, less flickering, perhaps easier on eyes, strained by constant smoke exposure. Some evidence suggests they collected and dried moss, lichen, and other plant materials that could serve as tinder and supplementary fuel. In treeless tundra regions, these humble plants might have been the difference between maintaining fire and losing it. The knowledge of which plants burned best, which could be stored longest, which produced the least smoke, this was survival information passed down through generations, refined through trial and error, essential enough that its loss could doom a community. But here is the central mystery. How did they keep fire alive through the night? We know they did because surviving without nighttime fire in Ice Age winter would be nearly impossible. The temperature differential between a cave with fire and one without could easily be 30 or 40 degrees, the difference between uncomfortable cold and lethal hypothermia. Yet maintaining a fire requires someone to stay awake, to add fuel periodically, to ensure the flames don't die to embers and then to ash. This means interrupted sleep, means taking turns, means a level of organization and cooperation that, while clearly present, leaves us wondering about the details. Perhaps they worked in shifts, each person responsible for a few hours of fire tending before waking another. This system would have required trust that the person you woke would actually stay awake, that they wouldn't drift back to sleep and let the fire die. It would have required fairness in distribution of this burden, or at least an accepted hierarchy that determined who bore more or less responsibility. Perhaps they used especially slow-burning fuel at night, large pieces of bone or compacted dung that could smolder for hours without attention. The skill of preparing such fuel, of knowing exactly how much to add and when, of predicting burn rates based on wood dryness and airflow. This was expert knowledge that distinguished skilled fire tenders from novices. Perhaps they simply accepted that fire would die sometimes, that mornings would begin with the laborious work of rekindling flames from carefully preserved embers. This acceptance of occasional failure, this resilience in the face of setbacks might have been part of their psychological survival toolkit. understanding that not everything could be controlled, that sometimes you started from scratch, that failure was survivable if you had the knowledge to begin again. Some researchers suggest they may have banked fires, covering them partially with ash and earth to slow the burning, to preserve coals that could be revived in the morning with fresh fuel and careful breathing. This technique exists in many traditional cultures, a way of keeping fire alive without constant attention. The banked fire breathes shallowly, consuming oxygen slowly, maintaining enough heat to stay alive, but not so much that it burns through fuel wastefully. But we cannot know for certain. The ash layers in ancient hearths can tell us what was burned, but not how often, not with what level of attention, not whether people slept soundly or woke frequently to tend the flames. What we do know is that fire management was a skill passed down through generations, refined over thousands of years, essential enough that its loss could mean the death of an entire band. Children learned fire tending early, watching first, then helping, then taking responsibility for keeping the flames alive. Those who were careless, who let fires die or burn too quickly, would have learned harsh lessons about the consequences of inattention. The social dynamics around fire must have been complex. Who controlled the fire? Who had the right to sit closest to it? How were disputes about warmth and position resolved? Fire was a limited resource, and proximity to it was a form of privilege. The politics of staying warm might have been as intricate as any modern resource allocation problem. Now let us turn to another mystery. What did they sleep on? The cave floors where Ice Age people lived are layers of compressed sediment, centuries of habitation packed into earth. When archaeologists excavate these floors carefully, screening every handful of dirt, they find traces of what once existed there. Each layer represents a moment in time, a snapshot of daily life, compressed and preserved by the weight of everything that came after. In some caves, particularly in South Africa but also in parts of Europe, they've found evidence of deliberate bedding. Layers of grass, reeds and sedges, carefully arranged and periodically replaced. Chemical analysis of these layers sometimes reveals aromatic plants, species that repel insects, that provide a pleasant smell, that perhaps had medicinal or symbolic properties. The choice of bedding plants suggests sophisticated botanical knowledge. Not just any grass would do. Certain species compressed less, certain reeds provided better insulation, certain sedges remained flexible longer before becoming brittle. The seasonal availability of these plants meant that bedding quality varied throughout the year, with summer's fresh growth providing better sleeping surfaces than winter's frozen remnants. The grass would have provided some insulation from the cold stone or earth beneath. Not much. Dried grass compresses quickly under body weight, loses its insulating properties, becomes merely a thin barrier rather than a cushion. But some insulation is better than none, and the psychological comfort of sleeping on something soft, however minimally soft, should not be underestimated. The work of maintaining grass bedding would have been considerable. Fresh material needed to be gathered regularly, old bedding removed and discarded or burned. In winter, when fresh grass was impossible to find, bedding would have gradually deteriorated, becoming thinner, harder, less effective. By late winter, people might have been sleeping on little more than compacted plant debris, offering almost no cushioning or insulation. Over this grass bedding, they would have placed hides, the skins of reindeer, mammoth, bison, horse, whatever they had managed to hunt or scavenge. These hides varied tremendously in quality. Fresh hides, properly tanned, could be relatively supple, could fold and drape across bodies with some comfort. But tanning was labor-intensive and not always possible in winter. So many hides were poorly prepared, stiff and inflexible, cracking along fold lines, allowing cold air to seep through gaps. The process of preparing hides was itself a major undertaking. After skinning, the hide had to be scraped clean of fat and tissue, a tedious task requiring hours of work. Then it needed to be treated, soaked in solutions of animal brains or urine or other substances that broke down proteins and made the leather supple. Then it had to be worked, stretched, and flexed repeatedly until it dried into a usable form. Not everyone had the skill or time for this work. Some hides were surely traded, creating economic relationships between those skilled in leatherworking and those who excelled at hunting or other tasks. The quality of your sleeping hides reflected not just your hunting success, but your position in the social network, your ability to trade and negotiate and maintain relationships. Multiple hides were necessary, one beneath the body for insulation from the ground, one or more on top for warmth. The best sleeping arrangements might use 4 or 5 hides per person, creating layers that trapped air, that held body heat, that provided genuine warmth. But most people probably didn't have 4 or 5 hides. Most people probably made do with less, with whatever they could acquire through hunting or trade, whatever hadn't been claimed by higher status members of the band. The mathematics of hide availability was unforgiving. Even successful hunts yielded only 1 hide per animal, and those hides had to serve multiple purposes: clothing, shelter walls, bags for carrying, sleeping covers. There was never enough. So they compensated by sleeping close together. Archaeological evidence from hearth arrangements suggests sleeping areas were communal, with multiple people sharing the same space, the same bedding, the same body heat. This was not intimacy by choice, but necessity, a survival strategy that sacrificed privacy for warmth. Imagine the sensory reality of this, the smell of many unwashed bodies in close quarters, mixed with smoke, with the animal's smell of hides, with the metallic scent of stone, the sound of breathing, snoring, coughing, the occasional cry of a child or murmur of someone dreaming, the feeling of someone's elbow in your back, someone's feet near your head, the constant small adjustments as people shifted in sleep, trying to find comfort on the hard ground. The lack of privacy would have been total and inescapable. Every sound, every movement, every bodily function, all witnessed by the group. The psychological adaptation required for this communal existence is difficult for modern people to imagine, accustomed as we are to private bedrooms and personal space. Yet for Ice Age people, this closeness was normal, expected, perhaps even comforting in its own way. It would have been difficult to sleep deeply in such conditions. Modern sleep studies tell us that humans sleep best in cool, dark, quiet environments, with minimal disruption. Ice Age sleeping conditions offered exactly the opposite. Smoke-filled air, the glow of fire, constant noise and movement, the press of other bodies, the hardness of barely cushioned stone beneath. Yet they must have slept because humans cannot survive without sleep. Perhaps they adapted, perhaps their sleep patterns were different from ours, more flexible, more resilient. Perhaps they napped when opportunity allowed, supplementing poor nighttime sleep with rest during the day. Perhaps their bodies simply learned to sleep despite the conditions, the way modern soldiers learn to sleep in combat zones, the way new parents learn to function on fragmented rest. Or perhaps they were simply exhausted. Perhaps the physical labor of survival was so demanding that sleep came easily despite discomfort, the body shutting down from sheer necessity, too tired to care about smoke or noise or the hardness of the ground. The daily expenditure of calories in hunting, gathering, processing food, maintaining shelter, tending fire, all of this added up to exhaustion profound enough that sleep became inevitable rather than elusive. Consider the specific challenges of different ages and conditions. Infants and small children who regulate body temperature less efficiently than adults would have required extra layers, closer positioning to fire, perhaps constant physical contact with caregivers to maintain warmth. Elderly people, with reduced circulation and increased sensitivity to cold, would have faced their own challenges. Sick or injured individuals would have struggled to maintain body temperature while healing. The pregnant women, carrying the future of the band within their bodies, would have needed careful positioning, not too close to fire's heat and smoke, not too far from its warmth. The logistics of accommodating everyone's needs within limited warm space must have required constant negotiation and adjustment. Now let us drift into an even stranger mystery, the relationship between sleep and art. Many Ice Age caves contain paintings, extraordinary paintings rendered in ochre and charcoal and manganese, depicting animals with such vitality and accuracy that they seem almost alive in flickering firelight. Mammoths and horses and aurochs, bison and lions and bears, sometimes overlapping, sometimes alone, sometimes accompanied by strange geometric symbols whose meaning remains obscure. The technical skill displayed in these paintings is remarkable. The artists understood perspective, proportion, movement, expression. They captured the weight of a mammoth's body, the tension in a charging bison, the grace of a running horse. They worked in difficult conditions, poor light, awkward angles, rough surfaces, yet produced art that moves viewers across millennia. These paintings are found deep in caves far from the entrance, far from the living areas where people slept and cooked and worked. Reaching them often requires crawling through narrow passages, wading through underground streams, navigating total darkness with only primitive torches to guide the way. Some passages are so tight that modern archaeologists must exhale completely to squeeze through, wondering all the while how ancient artists managed to carry pigments and tools through such constricted spaces. Why paint there? Why venture into such difficult, dangerous spaces to create art? Many theories exist. Some researchers suggest these deep caves were sacred spaces used for rituals and ceremonies, perhaps initiations where young people were taken into darkness and shown the paintings as part of becoming adults. The psychological impact of such an experience would have been profound. The terror of crawling through darkness, the claustrophobia of narrow passages, then suddenly emerging into a chamber illuminated by torches, walls alive with painted animals. Others propose shamanic practices, altered states of consciousness, induced through darkness and sensory deprivation, with the paintings serving as portals to spirit worlds. The deep caves offered perfect conditions for such experiences: complete darkness, silence broken only by the sound of underground water, cold that penetrated to the bone, isolation from the ordinary world. In such circumstances, the boundary between consciousness and dream might have seemed thin indeed. But some paintings exist in living areas too, in the very caves where people slept. The ceiling above a hearth might bear images of animals, of handprints in ochre, of abstract patterns that catch the firelight and seem to move. These paintings serve different purposes than the deep cave art. They were part of daily life rather than separated from it, witnesses to ordinary activities rather than destinations for extraordinary journeys. Imagine sleeping beneath those images. Imagine lying on your grass mat, wrapped in hides, watching the fire cast shifting shadows across paintings of the animals you hunt, the animals you fear, the animals whose lives intersect with yours in ways both practical and profound. The paintings would have moved in firelight, would have seemed almost alive. A painted horse might appear to run as flames flickered. A mammoth's trunk might seem to sway. The illusion of movement, created accidentally by the interaction of art and light, would have blurred the boundary between representation and reality, between the animals on the wall and the animals in the world beyond the cave. Did those images inhabit their dreams? When a person drifted into sleep looking at a painted mammoth, did mammoths walk through their dreamscape? Did the art serve as a kind of dream guide, shaping the content of sleep, connecting sleeping minds to the animals and spirits they believed populated the world? We know from neurological studies that the last things we see before sleep often influence our dreams. We know that humans in all cultures dream about their daily concerns, their fears, their desires. For Ice Age people, those concerns centered on animals, finding them, killing them, avoiding being killed by them. The paintings may have been a way of extending that relationship into the realm of sleep, of keeping the connection alive even in unconsciousness. Or perhaps the connection runs deeper. Perhaps the act of painting was itself a kind of dreaming, a way of accessing knowledge or vision that existed beyond ordinary waking consciousness. Many traditional cultures describe art making as a trance state, a communication with forces beyond human understanding. The artist becomes a conduit, a vessel through which something larger flows and takes form on rock or hide or bone. If this was true for Ice Age painters, then the paintings near sleeping areas might have served as a kind of bridge between waking and sleeping states, between ordinary consciousness and something more expansive. Falling asleep while looking at images created in trance might have been a way of following the artist's journey, of accessing the same realm of vision and knowledge. The paintings offer another mystery too, the handprints. Many Ice Age caves contain prints of human hands, created by placing a hand against the rock wall and blowing pigment around it, leaving a negative image, a ghost of the hand that was once there. These handprints are deeply moving to modern viewers. They're so recognizably human, so immediate. You can see the slight spread of fingers, the individual proportions that made each hand unique. Some are adult hands, some are children's, some show evidence of missing fingers, whether from frostbite, injury, or ritual amputation, we cannot know. The act of creating a handprint was simple enough that even young children could participate. Unlike the complex animal paintings that required skilled artists, handprints were democratic, accessible, universal. Anyone could leave their mark, could say, "I was here," could participate in making the cave walls into a record of human presence. Were these handprints made near sleeping areas? Some were. Imagine a child placing their hand against cold stone, watching as an adult blew ochre around it, creating a permanent record of their presence. Then imagine that child sleeping beneath that handprint, seeing their own mark on the wall, knowing they were part of the cave, part of the community, part of something that would endure beyond their own brief life. Perhaps those handprints served as comfort. Perhaps in the long dark nights when cold pressed close and hunger gnawed, and sleep was difficult, looking at those marks, evidence of human presence, human creativity, human persistence, provided reassurance that others had survived here before, that this place was safe, that morning would come again. The accumulation of handprints over generations would have created a visual history of the community. New marks appearing each year, old marks fading slowly, the walls becoming a palimpsest of presence, layer upon layer of human assertion against the darkness and cold. Or perhaps they served memory. Perhaps each handprint represented someone who had died, a way of keeping the dead present, of ensuring they remained part of the sleeping community even after their breath had ceased. Perhaps children were told stories about each print. This was your grandmother's hand. This was your uncle who died in the hunt. This was the old shaman who knew the cure for winter cough. This interpretation suggests a different relationship with death than modern cultures typically maintain. Instead of separating the dead from the living, removing their presence from daily life, Ice Age people might have woven the dead into the fabric of existence, making them permanent witnesses to the ongoing life of the community. Sleeping beneath their handprints would have kept them close, kept their memory alive, kept their protection and guidance available even after death. We cannot know. The hands remain on the walls, silent, offering their mystery without explanation. All we can do is look and wonder and feel the strange recognition that those were hands like ours, attached to people like us, people who slept and dreamed and struggled and created beauty even in the hardest circumstances. There is one more mystery to consider, perhaps the deepest one, the question of what they believed about sleep itself. In many traditional cultures, sleep is not simply a biological necessity but a spiritual state, a time when the soul leaves the body to travel in other realms. Dreams are not random neural firing, but meaningful communications, messages from ancestors or spirits or the future itself. Some cultures believe the sleeping soul can visit distant places, can meet with other sleeping souls, can gain knowledge impossible to acquire in waking life. Did Ice Age people believe something similar? The evidence is suggestive but not conclusive. The elaborate burials, the cave paintings, the careful attention to ritual and ceremony all suggest a rich spiritual life, a belief in forces beyond the purely material. The burial practices are particularly revealing. Bodies positioned with care, accompanied by tools and ornaments, sometimes covered with ochre, sometimes arranged in fetal positions, suggesting rebirth or return to the womb of the earth. This level of ceremony indicates belief in some form of continued existence, some journey that required preparation and provision. If they believed in an afterlife, did they also believe in nightly journeys during sleep? Did they see dreams as temporary deaths, brief excursions into the realm where the fully dead resided permanently? Such beliefs would have made sleep both precious and dangerous, a gift of communion with the ancestors, but also a risk of not returning fully to the body. Perhaps they believed that sleep was dangerous, a time when the soul was vulnerable, when malevolent spirits could steal a person away. Perhaps that's part of why they slept in groups pressed close together, not just for warmth, but for protection, to keep watch over each other's souls as well as each other's bodies. This interpretation adds layers to the communal sleeping arrangements. The person lying beside you wasn't just sharing body heat, they were guarding your soul during its nightly absence, ready to wake you if you seemed troubled in dreams, if you appeared to be struggling to return to your body. The sounds of sleep, breathing, murmuring, occasional cries, became markers of spiritual as well as physical well-being. Or perhaps they believed sleep was sacred, a gift from benevolent forces, a nightly death and rebirth that connected them to the cycles of nature, to the darkness and light, to the turning of seasons. Winter sleep might have been seen as mimicking the earth's own dormancy, with spring awakening both land and people to renewed vitality. Perhaps they had elaborate practices around sleep, songs to sing before closing eyes, gestures to make to ensure good dreams, taboos about waking someone suddenly lest their soul not have time to return to their body. Many cultures maintain such practices, treating the transition between waking and sleeping as a threshold requiring ritual attention. The placement of certain objects near sleeping areas, special stones, carved figures, arranged bones, might have served protective or invocative purposes. These weren't mere decorations but spiritual technology, tools for managing the dangerous transition into and out of consciousness. Or perhaps more simply, they were too tired to think about such things. Perhaps sleep for them was merely relief, a cessation of struggle, a few hours of darkness that required no interpretation because the waking world demanded all their attention. This interpretation shouldn't be dismissed as reductive. The exhaustion of daily survival might have made sleep something too precious to complicate with elaborate beliefs. When rest is scarce, when cold is constant, when hunger is ever present, sleep becomes simply what you crave, what you need, what you seize whenever possible, without worrying about its metaphysical implications. Yet humans seem almost incapable of leaving existential experiences uninterpreted. Even in the most challenging circumstances, we create meaning, we tell stories, we build frameworks for understanding. It seems likely that Ice Age people, like all people, wondered about the strange experience of consciousness disappearing and returning, of time passing without awareness, of the vivid hallucinations we call dreams. Perhaps different individuals held different beliefs just as people do today. Perhaps some were spiritual interpreters of dreams while others were pragmatists focused on survival. Perhaps belief and practice varied across bands and regions, with some groups developing elaborate sleep rituals while others maintained simpler approaches. The one certainty is that sleep was unavoidable and universal. Every person in every band had to navigate this daily dissolution of consciousness, had to surrender to darkness and cold and vulnerability, had to trust that morning would return and find them still alive. We are left in the end with fragments, with hearths and bedding traces, with paintings and handprints, with burials that suggest care and ritual, with the evidence that humans survived, that they slept through winters we can barely imagine, that they woke again and continued. The tools they left behind tell partial stories. The scrapers for cleaning hides speak of the work of making sleeping surfaces. The stone lamps with their traces of burned fat illuminate the effort to extend light into darkness. The layers of ash in hearths record thousands of fires tended, thousands of nights survived. But the mystery is not just what they did, but what they felt. Not just how they stayed warm, but whether warmth meant to them what it means to us: comfort, safety, home. Not just how they slept, but what dreams accompanied them into darkness, what hopes carried them through to morning. Did a mother pulling hide covers over her sleeping child feel the same tender protectiveness that mothers feel today? Did an old person feeling death approach wonder what sleep would be like when it became permanent? Did young people dream of adventure, of discovery, of lives different from the ones they inherited? These are questions that archaeology, for all its careful excavation and analysis, cannot fully answer. These are questions that require imagination, empathy, the willingness to look at cold stone and ash and bone and see not just artifacts, but lives. Human lives as complex and mysterious as our own, as full of small joys and large sorrows, of competence and confusion, of knowledge and uncertainty. The scientific data gives us parameters: average temperatures, typical fuel consumption rates, probable nutritional status. But parameters aren't experiences. Numbers can't capture the subjective reality of cold, the particular quality of exhaustion after a long day of survival work, the specific texture of fear when fire burned low and wind howled outside. And perhaps that's fitting. Perhaps some mysteries should remain mysteries, should be allowed to keep their quiet, their darkness, their refusal to be fully known. Perhaps the unknowability of Ice Age sleep is part of what makes it so compelling, what draws us to imagine ourselves into their experience, to feel our way toward understanding even when certainty eludes us. We are separated from them by time almost incomprehensible, tens of thousands of years, thousands of generations, countless lives lived and lost and forgotten. Yet we recognize them as human, as kin, as fundamentally like us despite the vast differences in circumstance. They slept as we sleep. They dreamed as we dream. They woke to face another day of challenge and possibility as we do. The fire burns low in the cave. The paintings watch from the walls. The handprints remain, testament to presence, to persistence, to the strange human need to leave marks, to say, "I was here," to be remembered even by people tens of thousands of years in the future, who will never know your name, but will recognize your hand as human, as kin, as part of the long story of sleeping through cold nights and waking to try again. Let us leave these mysteries as we found them, unanswered but not unanswerable, unknown but not unknowable, resting in the darkness like embers that might, with the right breath, with the right attention, flare again into light. The questions remain. How did it feel to sleep in the Ice Age? What comfort did they find in the darkness? What fears troubled their rest? What dreams sustained them through impossible cold? We'll never know with certainty. But in asking, in wondering, in reaching across the vast gulf of time to imagine their experience, we keep them alive. We make them present. We acknowledge that their struggle to stay warm, to stay alive, to sleep and wake and continue was not so different from our own daily effort to persist, to find comfort, to rest and rise again. They succeeded. They survived. We are the proof, their distant children, carrying forward the lineage that weathered the ice, that kept the fires burning through endless winter nights, that slept and dreamed and woke to try again. The caves remain dark and cold, waiting for those who would seek to understand. The hearths are long cold, but the stones still bear the marks of ancient heat. The paintings still watch from the walls, animals frozen in eternal motion. The handprints remain, reaching across millennia, saying in silent eloquence what words cannot fully express. We were here, we lived, we struggled, we persisted, and perhaps that is enough. Perhaps the mystery of how they felt as they drifted into sleep, what dreams accompanied them into darkness, what hopes carried them through to morning. Perhaps these questions are meant to remain open, invitations to wonder rather than problems to be solved. The fire burns low, the darkness gathers, the cold presses close, and somewhere across the impossible distance of time, Ice Age people settle into their grass beds, pull hide covers close, and surrender to sleep, trusting that morning will come again, that the fire will still burn, that life will continue. We cannot know them fully, but we can honor them with our curiosity, our empathy, our willingness to imagine the unimaginable, what it meant to be human when being human required such relentless courage, such constant vigilance, such absolute determination to survive. They slept and woke and continued, and in that simple persistence lies something profound, something that connects us across all the millennia that separate their world from ours. We are all, in the end, trying to make it through the night, trying to find warmth and rest and hope enough to face another day. The mysteries remain, the questions persist, and perhaps that is exactly as it should be. As we drift deeper into this winter night, as the fire settles into its quietest burning, let us turn now to a different kind of mystery. Not the mystery of survival itself, but the mystery of difference. The question of whether, even in a world where everyone struggled, some struggled less than others. We imagine Ice Age societies as egalitarian, as bands of equals working together for mutual survival. And in many ways this is true. There were no palaces, no armies, no bureaucracies to enforce the will of rulers. There were no written laws, no police, no prisons. Power, if it existed at all, must have been subtle, personal, earned, rather than inherited. And yet, the evidence suggests that even here, even in the depths of winter when survival was uncertain for everyone, hierarchy existed. Some people were valued more than others. Some people received more care, more resources, more of the small comforts that made life marginally more bearable. How do we know this? We know it from the burials. When archaeologists excavate Ice Age graves, they find remarkable variation in how bodies were treated after death. Some burials are simple, a body placed in the ground with little ceremony, perhaps a stone or two to mark the spot, nothing more. Others are elaborate, almost extravagant given the circumstances, adorned with thousands of beads, painted with precious ochre, surrounded by carved ivory and carefully selected tools. The Sunghir burial we spoke of earlier, the woman with her beads, is one example, but there are others, even more striking. At the same site, archaeologists found the graves of two children buried together, their bodies covered in nearly 10,000 ivory beads, each bead representing hours of labor. 10,000 hours, 10,000 moments of someone sitting by a fire, carving patiently, creating adornment for children who had died. Why? What made these children worthy of such investment? Were they the offspring of important people? Were they themselves considered special in some way, chosen by spirits, marked by unusual abilities, destined for roles they would never fulfill? Or was the elaborate burial itself the point, a way for the community to process grief, to demonstrate their own skill and devotion, to create meaning in a world where death, especially the death of children, was common and seemingly random? We cannot know, but what we can say with certainty is that these burials required social organization, required the cooperation of many people over extended periods, required a community willing to invest scarce resources in ritual rather than immediate survival. This suggests structure, suggests roles, suggests that some individuals held positions of influence that allowed them to direct such efforts. Let us imagine then what hierarchy might have looked like in an Ice Age winter band, not with certainty but with careful speculation based on what the evidence allows. At the top, perhaps, were the elders, not necessarily the oldest in years because few people lived to what we would consider old age, but those who had survived long enough to accumulate knowledge. Those who remembered where the herds had moved in past winters, which plants emerged first in spring, what signs preceded dangerous storms. Those who carried stories, who could recite the genealogies of the band, who knew the rituals that maintained connection with the spirit world. These elders would not have ruled in any formal sense. There were no thrones, no crowns, no titles that we know of, but their advice would have been sought, their opinions would have carried weight. When decisions needed to be made, where to camp, when to move, whether to risk a dangerous hunt, the elders would have spoken and others would have listened. And in winter, when survival depended on knowledge and experience more than physical strength, the elders' value would have been highest. They would have been given good sleeping places close to the fire but away from drafts. They would have received extra portions when food allowed, because keeping them alive meant keeping knowledge alive. They would have been wrapped in the best furs, tended to when they fell ill, honored in ways both subtle and overt. Then there were the shamans, the ritual specialists, those who claimed, and were believed to possess, special connections to forces beyond human understanding. Every traditional society we know of has such figures, individuals who serve as intermediaries between the visible and invisible worlds, who interpret dreams and omens, who perform ceremonies meant to ensure successful hunts, or heal the sick, or guide the dead to their proper resting places. In Ice Age bands, shamans probably existed too. The cave paintings suggest this. Some images seem to show figures that are part human, part animal, perhaps representations of shamanic transformation, of the ability to take on animal form in trance states. The elaborate burials suggest it too. The investment of resources in ritual speaks to a belief that such rituals mattered, that they had real effects, and someone had to know how to perform them correctly. A shaman's life would have been different from others in the band. They might have slept apart in a separate area of the cave where they could perform private rituals, where they could enter trance states without disturbance. They might have worn distinctive clothing, cloaks made from rare animal skins, headdresses of bone and feather, ornaments that marked them as set apart, as occupying a space between human and spirit. They might have had access to special substances, certain plants that altered consciousness, that allowed visions, that opened doors to other realms of experience. Evidence of drug use in prehistoric societies is difficult to find, but later traditional cultures across the world used psychoactive plants in ritual contexts, and there's no reason to think Ice Age shamans didn't do the same. In winter, a shaman's role would have been particularly important. When people were sick, when food was scarce, when the endless cold and darkness pressed down on the band's collective spirit, the shaman would have performed ceremonies meant to address these problems, not in the way modern medicine addresses them, with physical interventions based on understanding of biological mechanisms, but through ritual, through appeal to spirits, through the manipulation of symbolic forces believed to control the visible world. Did it work? In purely material terms, probably not. A ceremony cannot cure pneumonia or conjure food from nothing. But in psychological terms, in terms of maintaining hope and cohesion and the will to continue, perhaps ritual did work. Perhaps the belief that something was being done, that supernatural aid was being sought, made the difference between a band that gave up and a band that persevered. And the shaman, as the one who could provide this service, would have been valued, would have been given extra warmth, extra comfort, extra attention. Not out of selfishness, but out of collective necessity. If the shaman died, the band lost its connection to the spirit world, lost its ability to perform the rituals that maintained cosmic balance. Below the elders and shamans, perhaps, were the skilled hunters, those with exceptional ability to track game, to read signs in snow and broken vegetation, to predict animal behavior, to throw spears with accuracy, to remain still and patient for hours in freezing conditions, waiting for the right moment to strike. Hunting in Ice Age winter was extraordinarily difficult and dangerous. Game was scarce, cautious, often desperate itself. A mammoth could kill you with a casual swing of its trunk. A wounded bison could gore you before you had time to dodge. Cave lions hunted the same prey you hunted and saw you as competition or as food. Successful hunters were therefore precious. A single skilled hunter might mean the difference between the band eating or starving, between having hides for clothing or freezing for lack of material. Such individuals would have been honored, their preferences accommodated, their needs prioritized. A skilled hunter might have had access to the best sleeping spot, the warmest position by the fire, might have received the choicest portions of meat from kills, not just because they deserved reward, but because keeping them strong and healthy served everyone's interest. Might have had multiple partners, might have fathered more children, their genes valued for the abilities they seemed to carry, and yet even their privilege was fragile. A hunter who was injured could no longer hunt. Age eventually diminished reflexes, weakened muscles, clouded eyesight. What happened then? Did former hunters retain their status based on past achievements? Or did status depend on current contribution, leaving those who could no longer hunt to slip down the social hierarchy, to receive smaller portions, to sleep farther from the fire? We cannot know. Different bands might have had different customs. Some might have honored past service, caring for former hunters out of gratitude and tradition. Others might have been more pragmatic, directing resources to those who could contribute now, in the present, with sentiment and luxury they couldn't afford. Then there were the craftspeople, those with skills in making tools, in preparing hides, in creating the beads and carvings that seem to have held both practical and symbolic value. We've spoken of the woman of Sunghir and her beadwork. Imagine others like her, specialists in flint knapping who could produce perfectly symmetrical spear points, or hide workers who could tan leather to exceptional softness, or carvers who could transform ivory into objects of beauty. These skills took years to develop, required patience and fine motor control, and an understanding of materials that came only through long practice. Those who possessed such skills would have been valuable, irreplaceable in ways that went beyond physical strength or hunting prowess. A master flint knapper might have been excused from some of the more exhausting physical labor, gathering wood, hauling water, because their hands needed to be protected, their energy preserved for the detailed work that others couldn't perform. They might have been given tools and materials first, might have had their choice of hide or bone or stone to work with, but again this privilege came with responsibility. A craftsperson who hoarded materials or refused to share knowledge or produced inferior work would have lost status quickly. In a small band where everyone's survival depended on cooperation, selfishness or laziness would have been noticed immediately and dealt with through social pressure, through reduction in status, through the simple but powerful mechanism of others refusing to share with someone who didn't reciprocate. And what of those at the bottom of the hierarchy? Those without specialized skills, without particular strength or endurance, without the personality traits that made others want to follow or support them. They existed too. In any group of humans, some will be more capable, more charismatic, more valued than others. This is not moral judgment, but observation. People differ in abilities and in how those abilities align with what a society needs. Those at the bottom would have done the hardest, most repetitive work, gathering fuel constantly, hauling water from distant streams, cleaning and maintaining the living area, tending children who weren't their own. Always necessary work, but work that anyone could do, work that didn't require special knowledge or skill. They would have slept in the worst positions, farthest from the fire, closest to the cave entrance where drafts entered, on the hardest ground with the thinnest bedding. They would have received their portions last, eating what remained after others had taken their share. They would have endured cold that others were spared, hunger that others didn't feel as keenly. And yet they survived, that's the remarkable thing. Even those at the bottom of Ice Age hierarchy were still part of the band, still received some care, still had access to fire and shelter and the minimal resources necessary to continue living. The hierarchy was real but not absolute. No one was cast out to die alone, because in Ice Age, winter, being alone, was death. And even the most valued members of the band understood that their own survival depended on maintaining the group. This was not altruism or morality in the way we might understand those terms. This was practical necessity. A band that abandoned its weak would become weak itself, would lose the labor those individuals provided, would undermine the trust and cooperation that made collective survival possible. So everyone was kept alive, if barely. Everyone slept by the fire, if some slept closer than others. Everyone ate, if some ate better than others. The hierarchy was real, but it existed within bounds, constrained by the simple fact that you cannot rule over people who are dead, cannot maintain status in a band that has fragmented or disappeared. Let us imagine a single winter night, and let us see how hierarchy shapes even the simple act of sleep. The sun has set. The work of the day is finished, or finished enough. The band gathers around the central hearth, the largest fire, the one that will burn through the night if tended properly. The eldest woman of the band, she who remembers 3 full cycles of the mammoth migrations, who knows the songs that call the reindeer, who once gave birth to twins in the depth of winter and kept them both alive, she settles into her sleeping place first. It's the best position in the cave, equidistant from the fire for warmth, but not so close that sparks are a danger, positioned where a rock outcropping provides shelter from drafts, where the floor has been carefully smoothed and layered with the thickest grass matting. Her furs are piled high, 3 layers at least, the innermost a soft reindeer hide, tanned to suppleness, the outermost a heavy mammoth hide that sheds moisture and holds heat. Others help arrange them, tucking the edges, ensuring no gaps where cold might enter. She does not thank them. There is no need. This is how it has always been, how it should be. Her comfort serves the band, keeps knowledge alive, maintains continuity with the past. Nearby, the shaman prepares his own sleeping area. He works alone, arranging his furs with particular care, placing certain objects around himself, carved bones, stones with unusual markings, a small leather pouch containing substances known only to him. He mutters as he works, words in a rhythm that might be prayer or might be something older than prayer, something that predates language itself, pure sound that carries intention without meaning. Others give him space, watch, but don't interfere. His sleep is not like their sleep. Sometimes he cries out in the night, speaks in voices that aren't his own, wakes with knowledge of things that haven't happened yet. This is unsettling, but necessary. Someone must walk between worlds. Someone must speak with the dead and the not yet born. The hunters settle next, a group of 3 men and 2 women who work together, who know each other's movements as well as their own, who have survived close calls and successful hunts together. They sleep near each other, not just for warmth, but for the comfort of proximity, for the reassurance that comes from being among those who understand what it means to face a mammoth with nothing but stone-tipped spears and courage. Their sleeping areas are good, not the best, but solid, with adequate furs and good positioning. They talk quietly among themselves, discussing tomorrow's plans, debating whether the weather will hold, whether the bison herd spotted 2 days ago might still be in the valley, or whether they'll need to range farther, into territory that overlaps with another band's hunting grounds. The craftspeople settle in their various spots. The flint knapper checks his stones one last time, ensuring they're positioned safely where no one will step on them in the night, where the sharp edges won't cause accidental injury. The hide worker stretches and flexes her fingers, already aching from today's scraping, knowing tomorrow will bring the same pain. The bead maker touches the strand of ivory she's been working on for 3 moons, a necklace meant for, what? Trade? Burial? Gift? Even she isn't certain yet, only knows it must be made. And then the others fill in the remaining spaces. Young adults, still proving themselves. Adolescents, just learning the skills they'll need. Children, some sleeping with parents, some huddled together in groups, their small bodies generating surprising warmth when clustered close. And at the edges, farthest from the fire, those without particular status or skill. They arrange their thinner furs, their sparse bedding, try to position themselves to minimize exposure to drafts. They don't complain. Complaint serves no purpose. They simply settle in, press close together for warmth, and prepare to endure another night. The fire burns steady. Someone, tonight, it's a young hunter, earning trust, proving reliability, sits watch, responsible for tending the flames through the dark hours. He's been given extra furs to wrap around himself because his task requires staying awake, and staying awake in cold without moving is harder than sleeping. One by one, the members of the band drift into sleep, not all at once, not peacefully, but gradually in fits and starts, each person finding their own path into unconsciousness. The elder woman sleeps soundly, her breathing deep and regular. Her body knows it's safe, knows it will be warm through the night, knows that if she wakes, someone will be there to help her, to adjust her furs, to bring her water if her throat is dry. The shaman's sleep is restless, punctuated by mutters and movements, his dreams vivid and strange, populated by spirits who speak in riddles, by animals who wear human faces, by landscapes that shift and transform according to logic that has nothing to do with waking reality. He will wake in the morning exhausted, will need time to sit by himself and piece together what the dreams meant, what messages they carried, what actions they require. The hunters sleep the deep sleep of physical exhaustion, their bodies demanding rest, their minds too tired for elaborate dreams. They sleep without moving, like stones, and wake only if something unusual happens, a sound that doesn't belong, a change in the fire's light, the sixth sense that comes from years of needing to notice threats. The craftspeople sleep moderately well, their minds occasionally drifting toward their work, even in sleep, hands twitching as if still scraping or carving or knotting sinew thread. They wake once or twice in the night, adjust their furs, check on the fire with half-open eyes, then sink back into rest. The children sleep in heaps, arms and legs tangled together, occasionally crying out or shifting position, one child's movement triggering adjustments in all the others like a chain reaction of sleepy accommodation. And those at the edges sleep poorly. Cold finds them despite their efforts to seal themselves in their inadequate furs. Hunger gnaws more insistently at stomachs that received smaller portions. The hard ground beneath them offers no comfort, and the thin grass matting does little to soften it. They wake frequently, shiver, try to press closer together, eventually drift back into the shallow, unsatisfying sleep of those whose bodies cannot fully relax, cannot quite believe they're safe enough to let go completely. This is hierarchy in winter. Not cruel, not unusually harsh, but simply real. Some sleep warm, some sleep cold. Some sleep soundly, some sleep poorly. Some wake refreshed, some wake as tired as when they lay down. And yet, and this is important, everyone wakes. Everyone survives the night. The hierarchy determines comfort, but it doesn't determine life or death, at least not directly, not in a single night. Over time, yes, those who sleep poorly and eat less will grow weaker, will sicken more easily, will die younger. But slowly, gradually, not in ways that can be traced to any single decision or any individual's cruelty. This is the nature of structural inequality. It operates through accumulation, through small differences repeated endlessly, through the slow mathematics of advantage compounding over time. Those born to the elder woman's family will learn her knowledge, will inherit her status. Those born to families at the edge will likely remain at the edge unless they possess unusual skill or luck, or the kind of personality that lets them forge new alliances, new paths to status. But nothing is absolute. A talented child born to a low-status family can rise through demonstrated ability. A hunter's child who lacks talent or courage can fall despite their heritage. Ice Age bands were small enough that everyone knew their abilities and limitations, their contributions and failures. Status had to be earned again and again through action, through continued demonstration of value. This is perhaps the key difference between Ice Age hierarchy and the rigid class systems that would develop later with agriculture, with cities, with states. Ice Age status was personal, not institutional. It could not be fully inherited because there was no mechanism to enforce inheritance, no laws or property or military force to maintain privilege across generations. Status existed, but it was fragile, constantly negotiated, dependent on immediate contribution and on the goodwill of others. A shaman who lost the band's trust could be ignored, could find his rituals attended by no one, could be reduced to just another person struggling to survive. An elder who lived too long, whose knowledge became obsolete or whose memory failed, might gradually find their good sleeping spot occupied by someone else, their extra portions diverted to those deemed more valuable. This fragility might seem harsh to modern sensibilities. We want to believe that respect, once earned, lasts forever, that those who contributed in the past should be honored in the present, that age and experience should guarantee comfort and care. But Ice Age bands couldn't afford such sentimentality. Resources were too scarce, survival too uncertain. Every decision about who got what had consequences. Give extra food to someone who can no longer hunt, and you've taken that food from someone who can. Let someone occupy the best sleeping spot based on past achievements, and you've denied that spot to someone whose current contributions might be more valuable. These were not easy choices, these were tragic choices, the kind that haunt those who make them, that create moral complexity in systems where morality often seems like a luxury. And yet within these constraints, kindness existed, care existed. The elaborate burials prove this, the time invested in creating beads for the dead, in painting bodies with ochre, in arranging the sleeping posture just so. This was not pragmatic. This was love, or something very much like love, expressed within the limits of what was possible. So we must hold both truths simultaneously. Hierarchy was real and created suffering, cold, hunger, discomfort, that could have been alleviated if resources were distributed differently. But hierarchy was also limited, constrained by necessity, by the understanding that the band survived together or died together. Those who slept warm by the fire did so not because they were superior beings, but because the band judged their survival to be particularly valuable. Those who slept cold at the edges did so not because they were worthless, but because in a world of scarcity, not everyone could have the best position. And all of them, warm and cold, valued and marginal, elder and child, were bound together by the simple fact of being human in an inhuman world. By sharing the same caves, the same fires, the same long winter nights, by breathing the same smoke, eating from the same kilns, telling the same stories under the same painted ceiling. The hierarchy divided them, but the winter united them. And in that tension, in that balance between division and unity, between individual difference and collective necessity, perhaps we can see something familiar, something that echoes in our own world, where we too struggle to balance individual worth against common need, where we too must decide who gets comfort and who gets hardship, who sleeps warm and who sleeps cold. The fire burns lower. The night deepens. And whether at the center of the cave or at its edges, whether wrapped in many furs or few, whether dreaming vividly or sleeping fitfully, everyone drifts through the darkness together, carried by the current of sleep toward whatever morning brings. And so we arrive at the end of our journey as the first grey light of dawn begins to touch the edges of the cave entrance, as the fire that burned through the night settles into embers, as those ancient sleepers begin to stir and wake to face another day. But we are not in that cave. We have only visited it in imagination, have only drifted through its smoke and shadows in our minds. We are here now, in our own time, in our own spaces, warm in ways those ancient people could never have imagined. Let us take a moment before sleep claims us fully to consider what we carry forward from that long journey backward. What lessons rest in the cold darkness of Ice Age winter? What comfort can we draw from the struggles of people so distant from us in time, yet so close in their fundamental humanity? First, perhaps, is the recognition of warmth itself as a gift. We sleep tonight beneath blankets manufactured in factories, in rooms heated by systems we barely think about, on mattresses designed by engineers to support our bodies in optimal positions. We adjust thermostats with casual gestures, expecting immediate response, expecting the temperature to bend to our preference. This would seem like magic to those ancient people, like the work of spirits or gods. The idea that warmth could be summoned without gathering fuel, without maintaining fire, without the constant vigilance and effort that kept the cold at bay, this would be incomprehensible to them. We have inherited their struggle and transformed it into convenience. Every warm night we sleep is built on thousands of years of human ingenuity, of incremental improvements in shelter and heating, of technologies layered upon technologies until we've created a world where cold is merely an annoyance rather than an existential threat. And yet, we often don't notice. We take for granted what they would have considered miraculous. We complain about minor discomforts, a room that's slightly too warm or slightly too cool, without recognizing the extraordinary privilege of being able to complain about such things. Perhaps tonight, as you settle into your own bed, you might pause for just a moment. Feel the softness of your pillow, a luxury beyond imagination to someone sleeping on packed earth and dried grass. Feel the warmth of your blanket, heat that requires no fire, no smoke, no constant tending. Notice the absence of hunger gnawing at your belly, the absence of cold seeping through inadequate furs, the absence of smoke stinging your eyes. Notice these things not to feel guilty. Guilt serves no purpose here, but simply to feel grateful. To recognize that comfort is not a birthright, but an inheritance, passed down through countless generations who struggled so that we might sleep warm. Second, perhaps, is the recognition of human resilience. Those ancient people survived impossible conditions. They endured winters that would kill us within days if we were transported there without our modern tools and knowledge. They did this not through superhuman strength, but through cooperation, through the sharing of warmth and resources, through the stubborn refusal to surrender to the cold. We carry that resilience in our genes, in the very structure of our bodies and minds. We are descended from survivors, from people who faced the worst that nature could offer and continued anyway. When we face our own struggles, different struggles, modern struggles, but struggles nonetheless, we draw on that same deep well of endurance. Your difficult days, your hard nights, your moments of wondering if you can continue, these are echoes of challenges humans have always faced. And humans have always continued, not because it was easy, not because they were certain of success, but because continuing is what we do, because sleep comes even after the hardest day, and morning follows even the longest night, and the cycle continues because it must, because we insist that it does. Third, perhaps, is the recognition of our fundamental interdependence. Those Ice Age bands survived through cooperation. No one could make it alone. The strongest hunter needed the hide worker to turn his kills into usable clothing. The shaman needed the fuel gatherer to keep the fire burning during rituals. The elder needed the young to fetch water, to help her stand, to listen to her stories, so knowledge wouldn't die with her. We tell ourselves in our modern world that we are independent, that we succeed or fail based on individual merit, individual effort. But this is illusion. We depend on thousands of people we'll never meet, those who grow our food, generate our electricity, maintain the systems that keep us warm and safe. We sleep soundly because others work through the night, because society functions, because cooperation continues even when we don't notice it. Perhaps recognizing this, feeling this connection to the vast web of human effort that sustains us, can soften some of the loneliness of modern life. We are not alone, not really. We are part of something larger, just as those ancient people were part of their bands. The connection is less visible now, mediated through technology and markets and institutions, but it remains real. Fourth, and perhaps most importantly, is the recognition that we are part of a story much larger than ourselves. Those ancient peoples sleeping in their caves did not know that we would exist. They could not have imagined a world of electric lights and central heating, of cities and computers, and the ability to preserve their bones and study their lives across the vast distance of time. But they lived and struggled and slept anyway, not knowing what their efforts would lead to, not knowing that their survival would make possible everything that came after: agriculture and writing, art and science, the entire vast edifice of human civilization that rests on the foundation they laid simply by refusing to freeze, by keeping the fire burning, by waking up each morning and trying again. We are the inheritors of their persistence. We exist because they endured. And we, in turn, are laying foundations for futures we cannot imagine, for people who will look back at us the way we look back at them, with curiosity, with empathy, with the recognition that we too struggled in our own ways, that we too kept the fire burning, that we too contributed to the long story of human survival and adaptation. This is what sleep means ultimately. It is not just rest, but renewal, not just the cessation of waking consciousness, but preparation for continuing. When those ancient people closed their eyes in their cold caves, they were trusting that morning would come, that they would wake, that the struggle was worth continuing. And they were right. Morning came. They woke. They continued. And because they did, you are here now, preparing for your own sleep, your own renewal, your own morning to come. The fire that burned in that ancient cave is not so different from the warmth that surrounds you now. Both are expressions of the same fundamental human need, the need for safety, for comfort, for a space protected from the cold indifference of the natural world. Both are achievements, triumphs of will and cooperation over circumstances that would prefer we did not exist. So as you settle into your bed tonight, as you pull your blankets close and feel the warmth envelop you, let yourself drift back one last time to that cave. Let yourself feel the connection across 30,000 years, the recognition that you and those ancient sleepers are kin, separated by time but joined by the simple act of closing your eyes and trusting that sleep will come, that morning will follow, that life continues despite everything. Feel the weight of furs that are not there, the sting of smoke that does not fill your room, the press of bodies that do not surround you. Feel these things for just a moment, and then let them go. Let them fade like smoke rising into darkness, like embers cooling into ash. You do not have to endure what they endured. That is the gift they gave you, the gift of all those who came before, who struggled so that you would not have to struggle in the same ways. You are free to sleep warm, to sleep soft, to sleep without fear of freezing or starving or waking to find the fire dead and the cold triumphant. This is not a small thing. This is everything. So sleep now knowing you are safe. Sleep knowing you are warm. Sleep knowing that you are part of a long line of sleepers, stretching back through time to the first humans who ever lay down by a fire and closed their eyes, trusting that morning would come. Sleep knowing that your struggles, whatever they are part of that same long story, that your rest matters, your renewal matters, your continuing matters. Sleep, knowing that the warmth you feel is earned, is inherited, is yours by right of being human, of being part of the vast collective effort to survive and thrive and create lives worth living. Let your breathing slow. Let your muscles relax. Let the modern world fall away, the lights and sounds and demands of contemporary life. Let yourself sink into a more ancient rhythm, the rhythm of breath and heartbeat, the rhythm of fire and darkness, the rhythm of sleep and waking that has sustained humanity since the beginning. The cave is quiet now. The fire has burned down to coals, glowing softly, promising warmth for a while yet. The sleepers are still, their breath rising and falling in unison, a symphony of survival, a testament to endurance. And you are among them, separated by time but joined by necessity, by the fundamental human need to rest, to restore, to gather strength for the morning that always comes, whether in ice age, winter, or in the comfort of the present moment. Sleep warm, knowing they slept cold so you would not have to. Sleep soft, knowing they slept hard so you could know comfort. Sleep safe, knowing they faced danger so you could know peace. Sleep well, knowing that sleep itself is a gift, a nightly miracle, a small death and rebirth that connects us to everyone who has ever lived, everyone who has ever closed their eyes and trusted that morning would come. The fire is dying. The darkness is complete. The world is quiet except for the sound of breathing, the sound of life continuing, the sound of sleep claiming another group of humans who survived another day and earned their rest. Let that sound carry you down, down into the soft darkness where dreams wait, where the past and present merge, where warmth is not temperature but the knowledge that you are not alone, have never been alone, will never be alone. You are part of the story. You are part of the fire. You are part of the long, cold struggle and the eventual triumph of simply continuing, of waking again, of trying again. But that is for tomorrow. Tonight there is only warmth, only rest, only the gentle pull of sleep drawing you into its embrace. Let go, let sleep come, let the ice age fade, and the present remain soft and warm and safe. Let yourself be held by all the beds that ever were, all the fires that ever burned, all the people who ever closed their eyes and trusted that they had done enough, that rest was earned, that morning would come. Sleep now, sleep warm, sleep well. The journey is complete. The fire is banked. The night is deep and peaceful. And you, modern sleeper, heir to ancient struggles and ancient triumphs, you have earned your rest. Close your eyes, feel the warmth, let sleep carry you into dreams. The caveman sleeps warm at last, across the distance of time, in your warm bed, in your safe room, in the comfort that was once unimaginable and is now simply yours. Sleep and wake renewed, and continue the story that has no ending, only the endless cycle of rest and renewal, night and morning, struggle and peace. Sleep. Just sleep.